Byron Donalds. Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning. Why is former President Trump questioning the vice president's racial identity?
Well, first, George, in Chicago, he was responding to a question from, I believe, Rachel Scott. Like, this is really a phony controversy. I don't really care. Most people don't. But if we're going to be accurate, when Kamala Harris went into the United States Senate, it was AP that said she was the first Indian-American United States senator. It was actually played up a lot when she came into the Senate. Now she's running nationally. Obviously, the campaign has shifted. They're talking much more about her father's heritage and her black identity. It doesn't really matter. The president mentioned it. What he also talks about far more frequently is the fact that Kamala Harris is the person who created this massive inflation, which is destroying black families, white families, Hispanic families. It's her failure as border czar that has left our southern border wide open, more than 10 million illegal immigrants coming into our country, record fentanyl coming into our country, which has killed more Americans than at any other point in the history of our country with respect specifically to fentanyl.
This is precisely why I have absolutely zero respect for the mainstream media giant MSNBC. Time after time, they have shown themselves to be untrustworthy, biased, driven more by agendas other than commitment to truth. Instead of providing balanced factual reporting, they often distort the facts, sensationalize issues, or selectively report information to fit their narrative.
And the fact that she and Joe Biden have unleashed one of the worst foreign policies in the history of our country that has us on the verge of World War III. That is Kamala Harris's record. President Trump talks about that frequently, but yes, he did mention it in Chicago in response to a question from Rachel Scott.
And you just repeated the slur again. If it doesn't matter, why do you all keep questioning her identity? She's always identified as a black woman. She is biracial. She has a Jamaican father and an Indian mother. She's always identified as both. Why are you questioning that?
Well, George, first of all, this is something that's actually a conversation throughout social media right now. There were a lot of people who are trying to figure this out. But again, that's a side issue, not the main issue. The main issue...
Sir, 1 second. You just did it. You just did it again.
Of the United States.
Why do you insist on questioning her racial identity?
You want me to talk?
I want you to answer my question.
George, now that you're done yelling at me, let me answer.
The blatant disregard for journalistic integrity is not only frustrating, but also deeply damaging to society, ladies and gentlemen. By prioritizing clicks, ratings, and ideological learnings over objective truth, the media giant contributes to division, misinformation, and a culture of distrust. They exploit their platform to push narratives that often mislead their audiences, leaving people uninformed or even worse, misinformed.
He talked about it on the stage yesterday in Atlanta for 2 minutes? He spent more than 35, 40 minutes going after her record, talking about how radical of a senator that she was. She was the most liberal senator in the United States, in the United States Senate. That is a fact. He talked about the job that she did as vice president of the United States, a job, I will add, which has been a failure for the American people. I know you guys like to glom on to this that he talks about in jest or in a serious manner for about a minute or so, but what you do not cover is the litany of failures of Kamala Harris. That's what you're not covering, George.
So questioning somebody's racial identity for a couple minutes is okay?
George, I'm going to tell you again, he brought it up. AP is the one that wrote the headline when she first came in to the United States Senate. Didn't talk about her being black, talked about her being the first Indian American senator. AP brought that up. I mean, George, we could have this conversation for the entire segment, but none of this matters to the American people. What matters to the American people is, are we going to have the same policies of the Biden-Harris administration that has been destructive of the American people?
What's even more infuriating is how they position themselves as the arbiters of truth, while vilifying alternatives, voices, or independent thinkers who dare to challenge their version of events. Their unwillingness to hold themselves accountable or to admit when they have been wrong further erodes any respect they might once have commanded.
Or are we going to have the policies of the Trump administration, which put America first, had low inflation, prosperous Americans, no matter your race, no matter your color, no matter your creed, and a foreign policy that kept America safe. Those are the facts that truly matter, because this issue is going to come and go. The lives of the American people is what's going to remain, and that's what matters more than anything else.
If it doesn't matter, I don't understand why you keep on repeating it, why the president keeps on repeating it, why those introducing the president yesterday
George,
keep on repeating
I'm not the one who keeps repeating it. George, you're the one that's bringing it up now. That's you.
You've done it,
I understand why
sir.
You've done
it. You've done it 3 times. Every single answer you gave me. Now let me finish, sir.
George,
every single answer you gave, you repeated the slur.
Asked me, George. That's why I'm pushing back on you now.
George is such a jerk. His disdain for Trump is beyond excessive. It's as if his entire worldview is shaped by an unyielding need to belittle and criticize the president-elect. I mean, come on, regardless of the context or even the facts. His hatred for Trump seems to cloud his judgment, making it difficult to have a rational or respectful conversation with him on topics or the issues. I mean, rather than engaging in a thoughtful debate, he resorts to name-calling, dismissive remarks, and personal attacks, showing no interest at all in actually understanding different perspectives.
George, you asked me the question 3 times. I responded, but
and every single time you repeat the slur. That is exactly my point. You simply can't say that it's wrong.
George, so then what you're saying, and I want to get off this topic because it's not the only thing that's going on. But George, now you're saying that AP is the one that slurred Kamala Harris, because those are the facts. You can go to the internet and look at the clips, George, if you want to, or we can talk about this now. I prefer to talk about the future of our country, because the American people are struggling. The American people do need serious policy decisions to be made, and they need serious leadership on the world stage. Kamala Harris has not proven that she can do that. Donald J. Trump has proven that he can do that.
What's particularly frustrating is how his negativity sweeps into everything he says or does. It's as if his entire identity is wrapped up in opposition to Trump. And it's almost impossible to separate his personal biases from the conversation. I mean, instead of offering constructive criticism or having a meaningful dialogue, he often stoops to juvenile insults and inflammatory rhetoric, shutting down any chance for productive discussions. Can you imagine?
AP did not say that Kamala Harris is not black. She is biracial. She is Indian. She is black. You continue to repeat the fact that you continue to repeat the slur. I don't understand why you and the president do it, but it's clear you're not going to say that it's wrong. And you've now established that for our audience. Trump also said at the convention that he would pardon January 6 rioters.
Everybody look for themselves. Let's move on.
I've already said that. Go ahead.
On the internet, everybody. Let's move on. There we go.
So, go on and repeat the slurs again.
This is why their downfall was inevitable. People are not as easily fooled as they think, and the truth has a way of surfacing. No matter how hard it is suppressed, the very lies they relied on to try to maintain power or influence became their undoing, as their dishonesty became more apparent. They lost not just the support of the people, but also the moral high ground they once tried to occupy. In the end, folks, their own actions exposed their true character, and that's why they failed.